Welcome to FMadd2 Second Chord. I am your host, Miles White. I was going to record this episode late in the evening after catching the Sunday rerun of American Ninja Warrior, which I have discussed at length on this program, only to realize that football season is starting up, and therefore there is no Sunday rerun of American Ninja Warrior, which, as my father says, is a summer television program. Summer is ending. Labor Day is next weekend. No Ninja Warrior. Football. So I guess I gotta get this, just finish this podcast at a reasonable hour of night and then go to bed early like a loser. A loser who would benefit from a good square 9 hours of sleep. But still, come on, man. I've never liked football. For years, I boycotted it on principle because I thought it was violent, you know? It's like, oh, the tackling. It's like, oh, that's not good. That's not wholesome. I was a weird kid. But given, all these people are coming out with concussions now and brain damage, I was right. Football is a weird sport. Football is like baseball in that it moves too slowly. But baseball is, like the American pastime. No one ever got a concussion playing baseball. Is tied deeply into the American imagination. Football, less so. Football, I never liked football. Football is, I've heard described as an abstraction of an army marching down the field, except without, the excitement of an actual army, without the pomp and the circumstance. The problem with football is there's too much downtime. Baseball, you realize there's downtime, but it's sort of packed into the game, It's the way the game is set up. There's like a low level of tension because you never know when the ball is going to rocket off into the outfield. Football, there's just downtime. There's no tension. There's no... nothing happens during these periods. No generation of interest. You just have to coast from the interest of the previous play. You think that this is baked into the game, but then you watch rugby and you're like, no. It'll be very simple to reconfigure this game so that it moves faster, is more agile, panther-like. But no, it slugs along from boop to boop. With all these timeouts, and you gotta sit around, you gotta talk about it, you have to have these huddles and these long commercial breaks. I don't think about advertising so much for basketball or baseball or any of these other sports because football seems more than any other designed for commercial breaks with all the downtime. In basketball, you get to a point where they slow the game down with timeouts because they need to strategize, and they don't show ads because they're not used to showing ads during basketball. They're used to sort of squeezing them in. They're not used to just having, these blank spots of nothing happening. But they're very common in football. I don't like football. Part of the reason I'm rallying about commercials is because the only thing I watch during the Super Bowl is the commercials. And also I watch some of the football, but the commercials is what I care about. But I don't care about that as much anymore because it gets to a point where you're like, why am I watching this for the commercials? I'm not going to buy Snickers. I'm not old enough to drink. I don't want to register an internet website domain. None of this is relevant to me. It's well produced, but none of it is relevant. Least of all the football itself, which you've never really cared about. You don't enjoy watching it. You're not particularly good at playing it. I've tried playing football, in schoolyard situations a couple times until it was banned from my playground in the 5th grade because somebody got hurt. At which point, the enterprising kids, developed something called European ball, which is like football, except you play with a round ball, and instead of saying hike, you say Mike. This lasted about a week. I don't even know if this lasted a week. It was clever, but it didn't go far enough, and honestly, I figured out what was going on, and I was an oblivious child, within about the space of one recess. So within 15 minutes, I went from, okay, European ball, to wait a gosh darn minute. This is football. We're not supposed to be playing football. I never liked football, so I had no real trouble walking away from it. I'm bitter. I'm angry and bitter, but that doesn't change the way I feel inside. It doesn't help that I've come from a long lineage of bad football teams. was born in Michigan. The Michigan team's the Lions. I don't think I need to say anything more about the Lions. They were good for a moment, but I don't know if they're good anymore. Anyway, by the time they were good, that was long past the point where it would have convinced me that they were, worth my attention. And when I moved to Ohio, at this point I'm actually old enough to pay some attention to sports. And, this is what boys are into these days. This is what boys are paying attention to at that age. And I come here and we have the Browns and we have the Bengals. The only thing worse than the Bengals is the Browns. I think the Bengals pretended to be good for a minute. But whereas, the Reds, the other Cincinnati sports team, were actually good for 5 minutes, just couldn't pull it together. I don't think the Bengals ever rose above a baseline level of mediocrity. This is not to say that they are without value. This is to say that they're bad at football. As people, most of them are probably okay, decent, upstanding, regular citizens. The majority of them, I imagine, keep their heads down because I don't hear about them, when they're not playing football. I don't even hear about them when they are playing football. I imagine if I paid attention to these things, if I put my ear to that gridiron, I would hear these things. But I don't, because I don't. But people enjoy football. Football is a national pastime to rival baseball. Football is something fathers play with their sons. Football is something men gather around the couch together for. Football makes friendships. Football makes rivalries. It is a shortcut to getting to know a man, a shortcut to communication, a shortcut to making some sort of connection. Football, which I've never really liked, but I have to admit, probably means something to somebody. Football. It's not without value just because it's interrupting my American Ninja Warrior. It's not without value because I think it's boring. It's not without value simply because I don't really get kicks out of watching, men run into each other. It has a lot of value. It makes a tremendous amount of money. It makes a tremendous amount of money, which is how things happen in this country. If football didn't make money, well, I don't know what to tell you. It's a good thing that it does for the people who like football. But if it didn't make money, people would do something else. Hockey. Football and hockey happen at more or less the same time, and imagine that if there wasn't so much dang football, the hockey watching crowd might be a bit bigger. Hockey is a more exciting sport anyway. I'm not into sports, but if I were, I would probably watch hockey instead of football. The best sport is basketball because basketball is the most exciting because it goes back and forth and back and forth. There's no downtime. It's consistent motion. Hockey is like that but more obscure. But I never did like football. And again, this is not to invalidate those of you in my audience of 3 people who like football. This is not to invalidate you. This is just me rambling because I'm upset and I've never liked football and it's hard enough to come up with anything to talk about when I don't have anything to talk about. I could talk about my dad's meatballs. Wait, I don't really know how much longer I could talk about that, other than mentioning they exist and they're good. They would make a fine snack food if we were to have a football party, my father's meatballs. I feel like perhaps we have had them for a Super Bowl. Because it brings people together and they come to each other's houses and they eat together. That's football. That's football. That's what it is in this country. It is a gathering. A good, manly, masculine gathering of men. American red-blooded men in manly rooms. Watching manly men make manly collisions against other men. Throwing the ball from man to man. Heading into the end zone. Heading out of the end zone. Preventing each other like men. Like a war. Like a war of men. Men. Manly men. Most magnificent men. Men.